Hi, Liz.
Hey, Olin.
Happy Women's History Month. How are you celebrating this month?
I am celebrating by watching Meghan Markle on Netflix, and then I'm going to go get some beeswax and make my own candles from scratch. How are you
Amazing.
celebrating?
I am celebrating by thinking of all of the women around the world carving out rich lives in spite of all of the obstacles to them. But these are all valid choices.
These are
These are
valid
all
choices.
valid choices.
Thank you for making me feel seen. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's start the show.
Yes, let's get into it.
Our first topic this week is I have called it Democrats kicking themselves in the nuts. And it encompasses a bunch of examples, but we're going to start off with the first thing the Democrats did this week to kick themselves in the nuts, which was voting to censure, well, not all of them, but 10 of them voting to censure Al Green in the House because he spoke up during Trump's congressional speech this week. Oh, what are your thoughts on this? Because I know how the internet reacted. The people on the left on the internet were very much like, this is bullshit. But what were your thoughts?
Well, I agree with the people on the internet. This time they are correct. There are times when Democrats can't, do anything, but this is literally their action. This is literally the one time they could have voted the right way, the correct way, which is that in the history of all of the heckling of Obama, of Biden, nobody ever got censured for that. So Why would you start now? And why would you cross the aisle to censure your own member of your own party who is rightfully resisting and making an opposition statement against all the values you claim to be protecting? Like, he's out there saying the things that you cannot say, that you then have the audacity to punish him for it. I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And some of the reasons that one of the people who voted for the censure had mentioned that the first step was to vote on whether or not they should have a vote to censure, because, that's how Congress works. And all the Democrats voted not to have a vote at all. And obviously that didn't pass because the Democrats don't have the majority in the House. And so that failed, and then they had to have a vote to censure. And that's when apparently some Democrats decided, now's the time I need to break with the party majority and vote to censure. The moderate Democrats who voted to censure Al Green are part of the overall congressional Democrats that we on this podcast have asked people to give grace. We have said, there's nothing they can do. But like Olu said, this was a time when there was something they could do to show that they're listening to their voters, that they understand what the issues are, that they are hearing what you are complaining about online, for those of you who are listening or who are, extremely online like some of us. And this was the Democrats' majority chance to show that they hear what we're saying. And 10 of them decided this was the time to, have bipartisanship. And it's insane. It's insane. This is why it's under the category of Democrats kicking themselves in the nuts, because those 10 people are now going to tarnish basically the reputations of the other 100 and something people that did not vote to censure Al Green. Now all Democrats look like a bunch of useless people because of 10 of them. And there was no good reason given for why those 10 people voted to censure other than, we shouldn't have outbursts on the floor. Okay, but did you do this when Republicans did that? No. So why are you censuring your own guy? Like, make it make sense.
Exactly. And it definitely undermines the entire party, the action of just the 10 people. At the end of the day, if you're saying to your voters that you're fighting fascism, then you need to present a united front. And I actually wonder what the speaker, or at least the minority leader, Hakeem Jeffries, was doing. You need to whip your people into shape. You need to let them know that whatever happens on this particular issue, we are all staying united. And it baffles me that at this point, they still haven't come up with a coherent response to things.
Yeah, that's true. And the reporting from Axios said that that Hakeem Jeffries and the House leadership, before Trump's speech, so before the incident that led to Al Green being censured, had urged Democrats to have, quote, a strong, determined, and dignified Democratic presence in the chamber. That's what Hakeem Jeffries had said to his caucus. And obviously, during the speech, the Democrats were not having a, quote, strong, determined, and dignified presence. They were yelling and had paddles, which some people made fun of. But again, this was what they could do. And after the speech, the Democrats who heckled and walked out during the speech were given, quote, a talking to about their tactics. This is what sources are saying. So Hakeem Jeffries actually ended up, first of all, telling them not to do too much. He was like, let's be demure and mindful. And then afterwards, when people ignored him, they got chastised for doing that. Which, again, Hakeem Jeffries, I feel so annoyed right now because you and I have had this conversation before on this podcast. We have done this on Threads. We have done this on TikTok. We have said, give the man a minute. Let him, figure out a cohesive plan to respond to Trump. And then he does this. And it's getting a little hard to defend him now. That's how I feel, at least. I don't know how you feel, Olu, but it's a little difficult to defend this. You're telling us that we're fighting fascism, but also we have to be polite about it. Like, I don't understand. I'm confused.
I agree. Like, the one thing the minority leaders should be doing is be able to whip up the votes and get everybody in line. And if you cannot get the entire caucus in line on a simple thing such as not voting to censure one of you guys, it doesn't give me a lot of confidence that he's going to be able to get everybody on board when the budget actually comes to cut Medicaid. Like, if you cannot vote in support of a member who is directly asking President Trump not to cut Medicaid, this easy thing
down party line, super easy.
Exactly. Like, it wasn't going to cost anybody anything. And like, Democrats have this like pathological thing for decency and decorum where like it clearly is not what your voters care about. Your voters don't want you to go there like sipping tea and behaving like you're at high tea with your manners. Like, nobody gives a fuck about that, right? Like, they want to actually see you fighting. And if you cannot even like stand up to the smallest of fights that doesn't have any political ramifications, whatever, like, can any one of those Republicans tell me that there's a voter out there who is not going to vote for them because they didn't censure Al Green? I mean, this is fucking stupid.
It is. It's very stupid. And for those of you who are not aware, the vote to censure him was 224 to 198. So even if those 10 Democrats had voted with the majority of the party, the vote would have still been 214 to 208, straight down party lines. So nobody needed their vote. Like Olu said, they did not need to side with the Republicans on this. And if you're wondering who are the people, let's just name them. Let's name and shame them. I saw a lot of people calling for these people to be primaried out of office in the next, round of elections. That's how mad people were. So we have Amy Barra of California, Ed Case of Hawaii, Jim Costa of California, Laura Gillen of New York, Jim Himes of Connecticut, Chrissy Houlihan of Pennsylvania, Marcy Kaptur of Ohio, Jared Moskowitz of Florida, Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez of Washington State, and Tom Suzy of New York. I read through a bunch of places here, but you can notice we're getting people from California, New York, Pennsylvania, Florida, Washington, Connecticut. Only 2 of those states could be called swing states, Florida and Pennsylvania, and Florida is barely a swing state at this point. So some of these people are in states where they're probably going to win, if they get their shit together. Why would they do this? Why would they do this? I know their districts might not be as blue as the entire state. Like Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez is in a district in Washington State that used to be held by a Republican, and she considers herself a moderate Democrat. But like Olu said, is this the kind of vote that would have cost her her seat if she had voted with the Democrats? No.
I was going to say, like, the only thing these 10 people bought themselves was actually just negative attention. Nobody has ever heard of Chrissy Houlihan, for example. Like, you could have just gone gently into the night by voting nay or present, right? Like, nobody would have remembered you or been angry at you, right? But like this like bullshit cowardly thing where she voted yes to censure Al Green and then ran to the Philadelphia Inquirer to go explain about how she's all about the rules and she's all about decorum. Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene not getting censured, and then y'all censure a black man. I mean, like, this is just like an encapsulation of exactly what Black people are facing in this country, where the standard is not the same at all for the exact same thing. And it's often actually the so-called like allies, the so-called white allies, the so-called white liberals who are like, well, but the rules are the rules. Like, what does that mean? How does that help anybody?
Yeah, I agree. And the whole, like, you know, being a stickler for rules or trying to have these like academic discussions about things leads us to our next example of Democrats kicking themselves in the nuts. So apparently there is a, let's say, quiet murmur, we'll call it that, among the Democrats, where some congressional Democrats feel that the party is going anti-tariff absolutism, meaning the Democrats, because Trump has put in tariffs against Canada and Mexico, blanket tariffs against Canada, Mexico, and China, all Democrats now feel like they have to be against all tariffs. So that there's apparently some line of thinking where, or at least in congressional circles, where there are some Democrats who are trying to make sure the Democratic Party is not anti-tariff absolutist, because they come from places that were negatively impacted by things like NAFTA, by things like USMCA, which is a Trump NAFTA. And so these Democratic Congress people are trying to position themselves as being central on the tariff issue. And one such person is a Western Pennsylvania congressman named Chris DeLuzio, who calls himself a union organizer and who is on the Transportation and Armed Services Committees in Congress. He posted a thread a couple of days ago where he was talking about how Democrats need to break free from the zombie horde of neoliberal economists who think tariffs are bad. And he said that he knows that Trump's approach to tariffs has been chaotic and inconsistent, but Democrats can't oppose all tariffs because then they're signaling that they're comfortable with exploiting foreign workers just to make stuff cheaply. So for a Democrat in Congress to suggest that Democrats are okay with exploiting foreign workers, that's a Republican talking point we have heard multiple times when we do things like TikTok Live, when conservatives will come and tell us, you know, when you say Trump's tariffs don't make any sense, conservatives tell you, well, that's because you want cheap foreign labor and you support child labor. Why would a Democratic congressman be parroting the same talking points that conservatives are using online? Why would that be happening?
It's even worse than like what you think, because this person is also just misrepresenting the Democrats' stance on tariffs, right? And I am sorry, if you do not know how to articulate the Democrats' stance on tariffs and make clear that it's different from Republicans, then you have no business being a Democratic congressman. Because the point is not that you cannot have tariffs. The point is that you cannot have blanket tariffs the way that Trump is proposing and, you know, I guess dilly-dallying on and swinging wildly on. You cannot have 25% tariffs on everything. To be clear, the Joe Biden administration actually called for tariffs specifically on steel, which is what matters to where this congressman is.
Western
He's in
Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh. He's representing the people of Pittsburgh, and Joe Biden was talking about increasing the already 7 to 10% tariffs on steel from China and other countries to 25%, right? And it's specifically because not only do they understand that the livelihood of the people of Pittsburgh depend on it, but there was a national security concern about handing over, infrastructure materials like steel to other countries. And again, if you're a Democratic congressperson who cannot articulate the way that the Democrats have actually protected American workers, please just let somebody else do the damn job. I'm sorry. This is insane.
No, it's insane. It's insane. And for someone who says that this is their job, right? They're a congressperson, this is their job. It's so ill-informed, right? Obama had tariffs. In fact, his administration put out multiple statements about how they were putting tariffs in place to protect the American worker. Joe Biden had tariffs. Joe Biden's administration went to court with Canada over dairy tariffs that Canada had unfairly, or, against the rules of the USMCA, had unfairly been sort of sidelining American dairy farmers. And Joe Biden's administration went to court to change that, to defend Trump's USMCA and fix trade issues. Democrats are not against tariffs, but it's yet another example of Democrats basically falling for the bullshit and then turning against their own party because they're trying to either protect a seat, or they don't know enough, or they're just being deliberately irresponsible. And it's unfortunate. And the next example we want to talk about of someone who did something similar is Gavin Newsom. For those of you who don't know, on this podcast, I am the person who thought before this that Gavin Newsom was a good candidate for 2028. Now, I don't know if it was president,
I want to be on the record that I never agreed with Liz on this point.
That's totally fine. That's totally fine. I'm not even sure that I'm convinced this is changing my mind, but I'm admitting that it's giving me pause. That's what I'll say. But I was Team Gavin Newsom to a certain extent for the ticket. I don't know if it was president, vice president. We'll figure that out when we get closer to 2028. But I was Team Gavin Newsom. And then he started a podcast, which, even though we have a podcast, we really have thoughts about podcasts. But he started a podcast and he had Charlie Kirk on, and basically shit hit the fan when his podcast came out. Although I know you're not his biggest fan, so I'm gonna let you start out on this topic first of all.
Okay, I'm just gonna say that if Gavin Newsom is going to continue this right-wing flirtation that he's doing, he's not going to smell the presidency because he's never going to even get through the primaries. And if you go on and invite Charlie Kirk, a famously white nationalist coded person, that's you already thumbing your nose at the black voters. And then you go on there and you start bad-mouthing trans people. That's you already turning against your base. I don't understand what the strategy here is. Are you going to insult your base and then expect them to vote for you in the primaries? What's the strategy here?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think to some extent, Gavin Newsom has really taken to heart that the lesson for 2024 is that Democrats were too far left. The national Democrats were too far left, and they need to be in the center. And I understand why people have taken that message away. We have had this discussion multiple times about whether or not the Democrats were actually far left if they were hanging out with people like Liz Cheney. That was even a concern, Olu, you brought up on the podcast when she was campaigning with Liz Cheney, was is this going to piss off progressives? It did to some extent. So we know there are Democrats out there who feel like the correct response to last year's loss is straight down the middle, maybe even leaning right. Gavin Newsom, though, being from basically hell on earth, if you ask a conservative, i.e. California, we don't think that. I'm just telling you what conservatives say. It boggles the mind that he thinks that there's any way, shape, or form he's going to be able to position himself as down the middle, being from the most liberal state, at least politically, in the country. There's just no way. It's not going to work. And I'm not saying that he needs to like move more to the right, but or left even. I'm just saying if you're going to do a podcast as someone who thinks they want to run for office, you don't bring on Charlie Kirk and you don't agree with him on anything. You bring on Charlie Kirk to embarrass him, make him look like the idiot that he is. You don't bring him on and agree with him on stuff and then expect to keep your credentials with people on the left, because that's not what's happening, right? People are pissed off, people are upset, people are disappointed, people are saying he's destroyed his career over a podcast. Was this worth it? The answer is no.
I completely agree. There is probably a strategy. There's probably some logic there wherein we shouldn't create bubbles and we should engage people on the right and see if we can change minds there. But what you're saying is exactly what you do. You pick the people who you can actually have a normal conversation with, and that is not Charlie Kirk. And then if you are going to pick Charlie Kirk, then you better make sure that you're not falling into a racist, transphobic trap that he's setting for you. Like, if you're not prepared to do that, you're not doing anybody any service, and you're actually doing a disservice to people by turning the already harsh light of criticism up on trans people. Like, we literally don't need this view from Gavin Newsom. All we're hearing all day long is how trans people are destroying the very fabric of society for some reason that nobody can really articulate to me.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the section of the podcast where this conversation happened. So for those of you who are not going to sit through it, and you don't need to, we'll just recap it here. So the conversation starts off with Gavin Newsom talking to Charlie Kirk around how Republicans are flooding the zone, which, if you're not familiar with, it's this approach that what's that dude that always looks like he's been drinking? I'm blanking on his name here. The one that was Trump's campaign manager about building, and I got a criminal trial because he didn't build the wall, or he scammed people about building the wall. Steve Bannon, my God. Oh wow! I just went on a whole journey. That
was a really good description.
Like,
he does have an alcoholic's face.
Yes. Steve Bannon, my God. Okay, so Steve Bannon had this thing about flooding the zone, which was their whole Trump approach to just like keep putting out all these stories to flood the news zone. So Gavin Newsom says, quote, "We're going to stand back and watch you run circles around us for 6 months, the next 2 or 3 years, waiting for the moment to finally strike. That's not necessarily the best advice." This is what Gavin Newsom said about what Democrats are doing. And then he said to Charlie Kirk, "Seriously, Charlie Kirk, give us some advice. Instead of standing back, letting Trump fuck up, tell us what to do." I want to reiterate, Gavin Newsom is asking Charlie Kirk for advice. And Charlie Kirk says, just
podcast brain gone
exactly.
mush.
Charlie Kirk says, "Get better ideas, Governor." And then tells Newsom, Gavin Newsom should use his platform to protest a transgender athlete who won a high school triple jump competition. And Charlie Kirk then says to Gavin Newsom, "Would you say no men in female sports?" And Gavin Newsom says, "I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. It is an issue of fairness. It is deeply unfair." Everybody saw that part. I don't know if people went past that part of the podcast. That's literally what happened. And then Gavin Newsom did try a little bit to redeem himself later. He said Republicans are trying to weaponize the issue, which they are. I mean, for fuck's sake. And Charlie Kirk says, "Oh, we're not weaponizing it. We're just trying to shine a light on it." And then Newsom agreed. And again, another example, Democrats kicking themselves in the nuts, self-owning unnecessarily. And to think this segment started off with Gavin Newsom trying to say he was skeptical of the Democratic response, and then he proceeded to basically do the same shit, damaging his own prospects. Why? With Charlie Kirk, who's not even that great of a speaker or a debater. Like, how did this happen? How did this happen? Unclear.
I mean, it's just a series of bad decisions that kept getting worse, starting with inviting Charlie Kirk in the first place. But like, How do you
Yes.
not even know that he was going to bring up trans talking points? Like, that's literally the entirety of the Republican sort of freak out that we're in. Like, just the idea of they, them is just like earth shattering to them. Their lives cannot go on if somebody just says, I'm a they. It's like, wow, they cannot even breathe. So how are you inviting somebody who you know is going to bring up trans issues and you're not prepared for that? And then you just like spectacularly hand them a win on it. Like, the best advice this guy could come up with to you is get better ideas and also just go shit on this like trans athlete that nobody knows their name on. And that's how you're going to win the presidency. That's the Galaxy Brain campaign idea he has for you. That's the Galaxy Brain like messaging idea he has for you.
Yeah.
It's actually, forget the transphobia. Well, don't forget the transphobia, but like
don't do
put
that.
the transphobia aside. This is actually just objectively a stupid like messaging strategy, a stupid campaign strategy for any Democrat to take on.
Yeah. And that's why you don't ask Charlie Kirk for political advice. Even Republicans don't do that. So one of the things that happened in his podcast, early in the podcast, Gavin Newsom did say and repeatedly said that his 13-year-old son is a fan of Charlie Kirk, which honestly made me, not literally, but figuratively weep. There's a 13-year-old, there's multiple 13-year-olds, including Gavin Newsom's son, listening to Charlie Kirk. Gavin Newsom said his son is such a fan that his son tried to skip school to meet Charlie Kirk. Because he's, so much of a fan. And I was thinking to myself, like, I don't want to give people parenting advice. We are famously childless cat ladies. We don't know what we're saying. I just want to ask a question. If you are out there, a liberal dad, and you find out your 13-year-old son is a fan of Charlie Kirk, or a liberal mom. Let's be gender, even here. It is Women's History Month. Liberal mom or dad, you find out your 13-year-old is listening to Charlie Kirk. What is your reaction going to be? Do you, if you're in a position, invite Charlie Kirk to your house to hang out? I want to understand what we're doing here. Are you okay with the fact that your teenager is getting life advice from Charlie Kirk? I mean, that's another thing that the coverage of this podcast is kind of glossed over, but it's like there's literally a whole new Gen Alpha, generation out there growing up with these quote influencers, and that's where they're getting advice from, including Gavin Newsom's son, and nobody's doing anything about it. We're just like, okay, well, we'll have him on the show and talk about trans issues with him. It's a little unreal.
What is he talking about here?
I don't know.
Have a son, and that son couldn't find any better role models aside from Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, I mean,
something's gone terribly wrong here.
I want to say we are not chastising a 13-year-old. Like, that's not what we're saying. What we're trying to understand is how the governor of California invited a known racist, sexist, transphobe to his home for a podcast, allowed that person to talk him into stuff, and then shared with the world that his teenage son is a fan. We're just asking questions. We're asking questions, and we are confused. That's what's happening here. I don't want to seem like we're attacking a kid, because we're not. I mean, he's 13. Hopefully he'll grow out of it. A lot of people are, weird in their teens. There's a lot happening at that age. You're trying to figure out who you are. We don't know how that's going to go. It's just interesting that Gavin Newsom did this again, kicking himself in the nuts. Nobody asked him to. Literally nobody asked for this. I don't even think the kid asked for this. That's just my suspicion anyway.
I mean, it's certainly not the best to reinforce to a young person that this is the kind of person whose views should be listened to and validated.
Yeah, agreed. And on that note, now that we've spent like 30 minutes talking about Democrats kicking themselves in the nuts, which was very frustrating for us. I mean, if you caught last week's episode, we were a little down, and we're not as down anymore, but there was just a series of unfortunate events this week, if you were a liberal who's paying attention. And so I'm glad we were able to talk about it. Now I want to move on to a different topic, which is, let's say, less consequential to the fate of humanity. And that is...
I would say has no consequence at all, actually.
Okay. I said less consequential. You want to be clear, fine. It doesn't have any impact on humanity, but we want to talk about it because this is our podcast. We can do what we want. But I wanted to talk about what I alluded to earlier, which was Meghan Markle's show on Netflix. I want to say it right off the bat. I am a fan. I'm just going to clear that up for anyone who has questions. I'm a massive, massive fan. The show is called With Love. It's on Netflix. If you have Netflix, you can watch all of the 8 episodes from season 1. And it debuted this week to mixed reviews, let's say. Mixed reviews. If you already know who Meghan Markle is, or I'm sorry, why are we calling her Meghan Markle? Meghan Sussex. If you already know who Meghan Markle Sussex is, you already know that whatever she does is going to be scrutinized like 3 times more than the normal person. And that's literally what happened. The show came out and there were so many reviews that were positive, but then also a lot of reviews that were very negative, accusing her of all types of things. One of the overarching themes was that she's out of touch. The show is out of touch. It's unrealistic. And if you're wondering what the show is about, it's basically a lifestyle blog come to life. So we wanted to talk about it because it's been fascinating watching the reactions that have come out after the show debuted.
I don't think this changes anybody's life in any way, aside from you're either into it or you're not. But I agree with you. It's the reaction to her is just essentially unhinged, like just not based in
it is
any reality, just everybody finding whatever bitterness and vitriol is in their lives and then putting it on her. This show currently has a rating of 2.7 on IMDb, and it's just clearly a small subset of very angry, deeply unsatisfied people who have decided to review bomb her, because I don't see anything in this that would make it a 2, right? It just seems like a very middle of the road, perfect Instagram come to life.
Basically.
I don't get it.
It's basically a Pinterest board come to life. And I want to say, like, I watched all 8 episodes. I powered through them the last couple of days. And I found it to be just regular, like, cute escapist television. In the same way, if you're a fan of, like, Great British Bake Off, you know, those kinds of shows, that's all it was. It wasn't trying to be, like, a recipe on how to live your life. She's not trying to, like, beat you over the head with her perfect life. It's literally just, she's like, this is how I like to do things. This is how I like to make small moments special. And I'm just going to share it with you guys because Netflix wrote me a check. You know? Like, she's not trying to start a religion. And when you say the hate is unhinged, I want to give you an example of how the hate is unhinged. So there's an interaction, which some of you may have seen online, between Meghan Markle and Mindy Kaling, who's one of the guests on one of the episodes of the show. And on the show, this clip is Mindy Kaling is saying, you know, I don't think people knew Meghan Markle ate Jack in the Box. And then Meghan says to Mindy, very calmly, very nicely, there's no shade or energy behind this statement. She just says, you know, it's funny you keep saying Meghan Markle because I actually changed my name. It's Meghan Sussex now. That's the whole interaction. Mindy Kaling is like, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, like, cool. And then they move on. But this interaction has gotten tons and tons of feedback from people saying, that Meghan was rude to Mindy Kaling, which is just, okay, that's not true. And that she's being pretentious because Sussex is the title, not the last name. I don't know enough about British royal family bullshit, but I have seen people who are experts who say the royal family can choose whatever fucking last name they want. And Harry and his family have chosen Sussex, and that's why Meghan changed her name to her husband's name. That's literally it. Instead, that has become a point of contention and negative feedback and people slamming Meghan. And I'm just like, what? The second example I want to share, on her show, and this is bringing up someone else who has now been put in this comparison because of news media. Pamela Anderson has a similar show on Prime Video. And on her show, Pamela Anderson is also at her beautiful home that costs lots of money, making food in her beautiful kitchen that costs lots of money. Except on Pamela Anderson's show, she invites professional chefs in. But it's basically a lifestyle show. On Pamela Anderson's show, there's a clip of her making ice cream. She makes ice cream. She puts some fruit in. It's adorable. We're happy. Yay, ice cream. Meghan Markle has a clip on her show where she also makes ice cream, except on her show, she decides to make it a little bit more special because that's the whole point of the show, by putting a few sprigs of mint in her ice cream. People watched both sets of clips, and the comments on Pamela Anderson's clip were, "Oh my God, this is so authentic. We love your ice cream. At least you don't have to put mint in yours to make it special." And then on Meghan Markle, "Why is your ice cream so pretentious? How dare you put mint from your garden in ice cream?" Unhinged reactions.
I mean, these are just the kind of people who, I guess, they just can't deal with somebody just saying, "This is how I want to be called." What does it matter what is on somebody's birth certificate or official title? Like, if somebody introduces themselves as, "This is my name," that is their name. That is how they want to be called. This is like the most basic form of humanity. You as a person get to decide what your name is. Like, that's the absolute freedom you have over yourself. And nobody gets the right to tell you that you cannot, like, change your name. I don't understand what the problem is. 80% of women in this country change their name after getting married to be similar to their own husband's names and their own children's names. It's the most traditional, most wholesome, most, like, patriarchal coded, like, just traditional family coded thing ever. It's the most innocuous thing ever. And these people somehow still find a way to hate her for it. And it's clearly not because she changed her name. They just can't stand her. They just want to bully her.
Yeah, we talked about it. It's like the whole bitch eating crackers thing from the internet, right? Like, if you're a 2010s internet person, you may have seen BEC or bitch eating crackers, where it's like you hate someone so much that if you see her eating crackers, you're going to be like, "Look at this bitch eating crackers. She's just eating crackers," but you're so mad by that. And that's what it is for Meghan Markle. Sorry, Meghan Sussex. It's just, there's so many people online who are very vocal, and there's nothing she can do ever that will please these people. Know that we've seen all the reports about how it bothers her, but I'm glad she doesn't let it stop her from doing things. This show has already gotten a second season. It hasn't even been out for a full week. And Netflix already greenlit a second season that's going to debut later, I think later this year. I'm happy for her. I'm happy the checks are clearing. I'm happy the haters are mad because they're just making her more popular. More and more people are talking about the show because of it. And some people are watching it and enjoying it. So that's great. It just feels like there's nothing she can do. And it doesn't help when the news media gets in on it. Like, I've seen some articles from Daily Beast this week where their reviewer is like trashing the show. You talked about IMDb being 2.7 out of 10. Even Pamela Anderson's producer weighed in on this because people were accusing Meghan Markle of copying Pamela Anderson, as if only one woman can ever have lifestyle content on a streaming service. And Pamela Anderson's producer of her show, which is on Prime Video, responded to claims that Meghan Markle copied Pamela Anderson by playing into that and saying that, quote, "They take pride in planting the seeds, and it's a compliment to see our work with Miss Anderson has resonated so strongly." That's the kind of shady comment that is playing into this bullshit. And I don't understand why Pamela Anderson is even involved and her producer is getting involved. But that's where Meghan Markle is in, like, the psyche of society. Like, she either has very vehement haters or fans. And I don't know. But I'm not going to feel bad for her. I hope she's okay, and I hope she's thriving with her Netflix checks.
the irony is that co-producer is actually just trying to ride on Megan Sussex's
That's true.
tails.
That's true.
Like Pamela Anderson's show came and went, and it didn't even make a bleep in the cultural sphere.
It did. I want to say, before you continue, that show debuted 2 weeks ago, and we hadn't heard about it until this Meghan Markle show came out. That's when we heard that Pamela Anderson had a show.
Exactly. And it is, at this point, can we just please stop? Like, you can promote your show and you can elevate your show without trying to bring somebody else down. Because what's it got to do with being the first? Like, gardening has been around for millennia. Did you guys invent gardening? Like, I don't understand. Is he trying to tell us that they invented agriculture and farm to table cooking? I don't get it. Like,
the Canadians did.
Exactly. Like, women have been sharing homemaking tips and sewing tips and cooking tips and child-rearing tips and all of these kind of domesticated tips for thousands of years. And there are so many examples of people from Ina Gertin to Martha Stewart to Gwyneth Paltrow to all of these people just capitalizing on the same thing. And you just pick and choose who you want, whose taste you appreciate, and you keep it moving. I don't follow any of the stuff because it's not like my particular brand of escapism. But I would consider it like pathological for me to go park myself in like Blake Lively's lifestyle blog and just start yelling at her. Like, I don't understand the kind of mental space people are in where they can't just like move on for things that are not for them.
I agree. And I want to say, like, when Selena Gomez came out with her show, her like lifestyle cooking show 4 years ago, it didn't receive this kind of backlash. I think it actually has also like an 8.5 on IMDb. Like, this is not the first time a streaming service came out with a lifestyle show. This is not even the first time Netflix has come up with a lifestyle show. Meghan Markle used to have a lifestyle blog when she was an actress on Suits. Like, this is something she has a track record of being interested in. And I want to say, like, if Netflix is going to write me a check, you bet your ass I'm going to be making beeswax candles. Like, what is the problem? I personally was like, I can do floral ice cubes. I should do that. There's been, at the grocery store today, there are more women buying flowers. I mean, maybe I'm like biased, but I saw people buying more flowers and I was like, oh, I don't know if this is about Meghan Markle or not, but that's cool. Like, I saw an article that said, because she makes a bunch of crudités on her show, the search term crudité is up 300% this week because people are like, what the fuck is crudité? Like, it's just cute, nice, fun, which, on this podcast we advocate for. We want you to like take a break from the bullshit. Like, yes, listen to us, of course, but I'm going to say I recommend watch the Meghan Markle show yourself and make up your mind on whether you think it's cute or not. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. You don't have to go online and become an asshole about it, though. You could just be like, it's not for me. Like, it's not for Olu. It's definitely for me. I have a trad wife side that's hidden deep down inside somewhere that enjoys this type of TV. I'm being
I feel like
honest.
that's the pull code for this episode.
I have a trad wife side. I'm sorry, okay? I'm going to admit it. I am going to make beeswax candles one day in like 6 months. I don't know. My point is, though, if you like this kind of TV, it's guilty pleasure TV. Enjoy that shit. And if you don't like it, that's also fine. But you don't have to be an asshole about it. That's what I'm trying to say.
I also want to push back on some of the criticism that, she doesn't have the skill or the background or the range or whatever. But this is the kind of thing where you don't need to. It's literally about your taste. It's a personal taste thing.
Exactly.
She is coming out saying, this is how I like to do things. And if you like it, great, you can follow it. If you're the type of person who wants to follow it. And if you don't, that's okay too. You don't, there are no qualifications for, I don't know, making the perfect linen tablecloth or whatever. It's just something that people make up as they go. Like, I don't understand people who are like, oh, she doesn't even have the qualifications for this, or she doesn't even have the background. What, you wanted to get a certificate? Like,
is there a certificate for flower arrangement? I mean, there might be. I don't know.
Exactly. Meanwhile, half of these bitches are running like their like Temu interior decor page on Instagram that nobody gives a shit about, right?
Okay.
Like, just
let me say this right here. Olu means Temu interior decorating. I get what you're saying.
See, I clearly don't like know these things because I see them on Instagram and I just like jump and pass. Like what is pissing me off is that these women and these girls who would like embrace the same thing from people like Pamela Anderson and Goop and Martha Stewart are seeing the exact same thing being presented by somebody else whose packaging they don't like for some reason. And instead of just being like, well, I have all these other options that can fulfill my itch for, you know, beige decorations and, you know, strawberry tarts, they're like losing their goddamn minds. And I actually don't understand it. Like, this is a form of bullying and piling on that I am so sorry to say this as a feminist, but like, women, like, stop, please. Like, somebody's life is not a criticism of yours. Somebody saying this is how I like to do things does not make them an enemy of how you like to do things.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that is a good place for us to end, right? Like, you're right. We should live and let live. That's the real point of feminism, especially this Women's History Month. Stop being so bitchy. If you don't like Meghan Markle, cool, move on.
Thank you for joining us this week. We have been Olu and Liz. We're taking a break next week. However, we will be back the following week. In the meantime, you can find all our episodes on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, liberalbanter.com, and everywhere you listen to your podcasts. See you next time. Bye-bye now.